Right. So the topics that I will be presenting is about, first, I will be introducing about enterprise architecture, because I need to put things into the context. Then after that, what are the components can contribute or can help in so-called compliance, not only compliance one time, but it's for many years to come for the bank. Okay. I understand that some of the financial services already engage, a consultant to do a quick fix. Quick fix means as long as for compliant audit they can do a quick fix. Quick fix is, I think you understand what I mean, right? But in the next future, when the thing not according to the expectation, the quick fix don't work. Okay, the quick fix is, it is, as what it says, is temporary solution, but we need to have some sort of a sustainable model, so that no more a quick fix. So at any time when the compliance is ready or the assessment is required, you can just press a button and get everything laid out, right? Because I also come across some of the financial services is that they have a team that maintaining the Excel spreadsheet. So when the compliance coming, the central bank coming to comply, to do assessment, they pull out this Excel spreadsheet, and I heard that loading about 4-5 minutes because they maintain all the relationship, right, about what need to be done. I mean, in today's era, I don't think we will accept that, right? If 20 years ago, well, maybe I can accept that. But in today's era, is that you're maintaining 5 people in the team just to manage the compliance. I think is a little bit not smart, not working smartly. Okay, so I'll be talking about what and why digital EA. Then after that, the last part I think quite interesting, right? So after understand about all the components, I'll be mapping into the RMiT document section. Okay, if you ever, I assume that you have read at least once, yeah, or you don't tell me that first time you heard RMiT. So you have read once, and I think it's quite a thick document, and I would say it's super comprehensive, right? Because targeting not only for IT people but the senior management, board of directors. So it means that board of director are now accountable. Okay, so board director not talking about about business, etc., but they need to know about this risk, right? Because if anything happen, board director will be answerable. Okay, and today I think the era of the finance, banking is no longer a brick and mortar. Everything is the technology. So basically, you're running a bank is like you're running a technology company, right? So basically, there must be something different than what we used to do in the last 20 or 30 years. Now we have to change things like running a technology company, especially today in the digital era. Okay, so that I think is my context for the part 1 of my presentation. Then I will go into the part 2. The part 2 basically about the solution. After all this mapping, what should we do? So that is where I think our program collaboration with the ABS to line out on all the program that we have, how we can help you to quickly jumpstart into the not only a quick fixing, but it's the long-term sustainability. Okay, so let me just go through the first topic. So I think you understand on the right-hand side the pictures, right? Inside out, outside in, outside out. Meanings the bank today don't work alone, right? You are got remittance with other bank. You have linkages with other business to business and etc. Right? So it is now, of course, the concept of how do you know about the relationship of this? Do you have that map? My question: if you're in the senior management, the board of the bank or the senior management, do you know what is the relationship? Or you just leave it to your team? Never mind, my team take care. My team is got the relationship manager handling with the rest of the financial services, with the business, with the regulatory. You can't do that anymore at this context, right? Because I think the world is complex. So it's like, imagine like the Waze, the GPS Waze, right? 15 years ago, who thought that we are going to use Waze? Do you think I don't know how to go home? I know how to go home. But I just want to make sure that, especially if your office in near Tun Razak, right? On the Friday evening, heavy rain, you just want to make sure that, can I reach home to Shah Alam by 7 o'clock, right? If not, then I will tell my family, you go have dinner, don't leave for me. I will just go nearby a dinner, right? It's not that I don't know how to go home, but I need to have a navigational concept in our life. We need to be able to sitting, especially today, like we work from home and we are not full force working in the office. So I really don't know what the other department is doing. So these are very, very so-called relevant today. And interestingly, this Gartner made this so-called article in 2014. Okay, if you see this article is in 2014. So Gartner made this article in 2014 and prediction in 2025. They mean 10 years prediction, right? That enterprise architecture will playing a dominant, and industry start getting to realize we have to change something. We need to have some sort of a proper practice. to drive transformation. Okay, and of course now with the COVID-19, I think the 2025 is pushed earlier, right? It is now because we can't wait for 2025 to get things happen. Okay, when Gartner make 2014, Gartner never know that COVID-19 coming in 2020, right? I think now it's become no longer a luxury, but it's a necessity. We need to have some sort of architecture in place. And of course, this is another interesting on the Gartner prediction. So actually, Gartner made the prediction in the last 4 years, 2018, 19, 2021. So let me just capture the last 2 years, last year and this year, right? So interestingly, the graph, if you come across any team that are having frustration with enterprise architecture don't work, you ask them where was that happen, right? Likelihood they're happening at the year 2011 or 2012. That's where at the bottom of the so-called the adoption of enterprise architecture going into the most slump. So it's like stock market, it's stock market crash. Okay, but now I think Gartner make it turn it around at the 2012, focusing a lot on the architecture, right? Of course, all the later the framework that I'll be sharing, or focusing a lot on the business driven, right? And of course, digital ear concept coming in the 2013, and of course, Gartner, I think now in the acceleration phase because of course COVID-19 is pushing it very, very hard. And I think in the Gartner predict on the 2020 is that the organization should be able, those who have enterprise architecture established, allow organization to become the intelligent organization. This is something quite interesting, right? What do you mean by intelligent? Intelligent means I know everything, right? If someone tell me, Aaron, are you intelligent? But basically, you can ask me about anything about the sport, about news, about current affairs. I can answer all that, right? So now in the organization, how do we become that, right? So this is something that I think to ponder, right? Because now, are we talking about smart organization? Are we smart, and our team, how do they get all the information? Especially if you have more than 10,000 staff and then with the hundreds of the department, how do you know what they do, right? This is something that are quite striking if you are at the top management level, right? And of course, in the Gartner 2021, this is actually this year, that EA should allow organization or to design the composable organization. This is very interesting because we can work anywhere, anytime, right? So any team should be able to segregate the tasks without even meeting physically, right? Like now what we do, everything do the online. So this is something that quite critical if you already have enterprise architecture in place, right? So this something that Gartner, I think when Gartner made this type of the issuance on the Gartner predict, they have done tons of research. They have got all the data that are supporting them. Yeah. And now this is something that just now I mentioned, right? How do we know about all the enterprises, right? Typically, if you're at the senior management, you have all these type of questions. I hope that I can call Aaron in the meeting, tell me about all this answer. Give me the answer now, right? If I don't have some sort of enterprise architecture, I will tell my boss, can you give me 3 months for the question number 3? Because that one I really don't know. I think nobody knows in our bank. This is something scary, isn't it? We need to be able to answer all this, like, tell boss, okay, can we get ready? I have all the information. Can we get ready, compile to you before lunch? Now it's like 10 o'clock, and I can tell you that give me 2 hours. That's what is supposed to be the answer, right? So how do we get that answering that in the few hours instead of few weeks or few months, right? And of course, answering this also, all the answer is interconnected. If you can get the answer one, your management will ask you a next question, and we need to be able to answer. Yeah. So that's where I think the concept of the enterprise architecture is very, very important, because traditionally business and IT are separated, right? The business people think like, I just give a requirement to the IT people, and the IT people review it and develop a system, right? Hopefully it can be done in few months, but sometimes take years, right? So all these are traditional way. If you continue doing this, I think it's not sustainable, because in the RMiT also mentioned that there will be a need for the business and IT integration. It's a couple of the paragraph. You can just search it in the whole document. You can see that there is a need for the business technology integration. So how do we do that? So of course, there should be a model, right? The model for both business and IT to look the same thing. So basically, they're looking at the same thing, and they understand at the same meaning. Yeah, because it's a very, very critical for organization today. Like every organization is relying a lot on technology. So we need to be able to see this clearly. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? So basically, this is I just give you a background a little bit, so that if you comply with this, then you can look at the I can imagine that I have done a lot on the enterprise architecture, that when I assume that I have done for this particular bank, when I look at RMiT, I'll be smiling. Why? Because everything what I've done is what they have been asking for compliance, right? It is the right thing to do. So the objective is this, right? That's why they got so-called senior management involved in RMiT. They got the business team, they got IT team, they got the project team, they got deployment team, they got even a training team. Because what happened is that they want to build a connected organization, from the strategy to the business to the technology. So this what it means, yeah. If you have some sort of meeting like this morning, you have a meeting on the strategy team, you want to change the strategy, and you can quickly, if you're using the enterprise architecture correctly, you can quickly identify which are the business unit will be impacted. Yeah, is it my wholesale banking, my corporate banking, my private banking, and my consumer banking? Are they impacted, right? If yes, under what business unit impacted, and what are the processes impacted because of the this morning strategy meeting? And after that, we can also know that what are the system impacted. Right, we have about maybe 60 critical core banking application. Which are the 60 are impacted because of our meeting? Can you tell me the answer now? You don't tell me the answer next month. Next month, I don't know, because tomorrow I'm going to make another strategy. So these are the things that need to be able for financial services to be respond, right? So of course, the objective is that we want to create a digitally connected enterprise rather than we are forced to be digital, right? Typically, what happens is that what I observed to many of the organizations is that they are running a digital transformation at independent. Some are overlapping, right? Some running independent, some is collaborative. So at the end of the day, imagine it's 5 years from now, what do we end up? We are going to end up into the digital island. I think you heard about the about island of system, right? Now we're going to have digital island of system. It's scary, isn't it? Multiple cloud, and they cannot integrate, cannot connect. So where do you want to start? You want to start 5 years later after thing go haywire, or just starting now? Imagine that in the era of computerization, for those of you who work more than 20 years, we understood that at the time, right, it's critical for us to computerize everything. Okay, so we don't really care about architecture, just computerize. But now we come into the situation that, oh, no longer we can do this, right? I need to think about architecture, because why? Business keep changing and our technology not fast enough to catch up, right? Now something, everybody moving to the cloud, everybody go into the, all the using the 4 IR technology. And if we don't have the architecture in place now, we don't hold that architecture design, everything will be island, right? At the end, we go back to square one 5 years from now. Yeah. So the objective is this: instead of having a digital strategy, go to the transformation. Meaning transformation is like a typical project lah, whereby actually the organization should go into the one come out the strategy, you go to the architecture, you understand the impact, you understand the dependency in the business, data, application, and technology. So you understood and you can see the pictures of the gap that you need to do, right? Because RMiT is talking about, you understand the gap on the holistic way, right? Because we cannot think, I understand only data gap, business gap, and technology gap, I leave it to the other team. No, you cannot do that. You have to have the holistic gap. Then once you understand the gap, then you can run the transformation correctly. Okay, this is not theory. This is the practical way, right? I cannot. This slide is not for sake of the doing a research, but this is what happened if you don't follow, right? If you go straight from the strategy to the transformation, you just pass it to the PMO or digital team to execute the project. You will end up like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just another project, whereby you don't hold the relationship. Remember the first slide that I showed about Gartner, about all the connection between inside in, inside out, outside in, and etc. So you need to have that visibility. That visibility take place at number 2, right? What they call it. And of course, now is that how does this work? I think in the architecture is that the purpose is that we want to make sure that we understand the holistic concept. What are the things involved in our initiative? We want to know about data and information. I think data information now is, everybody agree, is another source of oil. Okay, of course we have Petronas, but information also is the key, right? You can sell that information, is the money, right? So how do we protect that? And some of the information are still in the island, some are duplicated. So how can we clean up that? So we need to be able to see this information architecture in place. Then of course they got business architecture, right? How do we process the loan, the remittance, the deposit, and etc., right? The transfer. So that's all the business architecture. They got the business SOP there. Then of course they got the application architecture, that is also a very, very important. All the system that we have, all the core banking, critical apps, supporting apps, right? That need to be sustained and also need to be mapped back to the business. And of course all the technology architecture, right? All the you name it, all the database, server, network, and etc. So that's all need to be glued together, right? Because if you don't glue it together, this all run parallel and independently. right? Quite sad that I saw a quite number of the organization, they have the architecture team, but when you ask them about architecture team, like for instance, yeah, I met with one of the bank, right? I think I don't know whether the person is here a few years back. So after I delivered the seminar in one of the seminar in the CIO roundtable, one of the CIO asked me, Aaron, can you go and meet up with my architecture lead, right, from one of the banks? So of course he connect with the architecture lead. So after like few minutes talking about how staying, what do you do, etc. First thing I asked, right, because he's the architecture lead, so he got the group of architects under him. So I asked him, what actually you realize of in your architecture about the business strategy, right? How do you map the business strategy with your architecture? You know what this is respond to me? His response to me that I asked the wrong team. I should have asked the business, because he said my boss involved in that meeting, but not me. Now I understood why the CIO sending him to meet up with me to have a chat, right? Then of course after that we solved the whole landscape, okay? Because it's not his fault, right? Because the job is given to him. He's the architect, right? So he looked at the approval governance, this application approved, this one not approved, this is data, okay? So the rest he can't see at the strategic level. That's why it's very, very important now the architecture need to be reshaped, right? To reform and map it directly to drive the transformation. And of course, with the enterprise architecture in place, then just now I remember I said that when you read if you have enterprise architecture in place, when you read the RMiT, you'll be smiling. Almost all the point that highlighted in the RMiT, you can almost comply, right? No much effort, I would say. Okay, because digital service and integration architecture also is part of the architecture, right? In the all domain, business, application, technology, data, and cybersecurity as well, right? Cybersecurity and the security are all there, right? For the risk. So it's also will be mapped there, okay? Because the next few slides I'll be deep dive on all this, right? So I just tell you the concept first. Then with that, you can easily drive transformation and strategy, okay? Rather than doing a ad hoc on the tackling a transformation, but you are doing it at a holistic approach, right? In a more cohesive manner. Then with that, we can produce a solution that is what we call it solution architecture that is useful to the business. Because when we talk at the digital EA, we are still holding the blueprint, right? We haven't delivered something. So the left-hand side actually is solution architecture is where we are going to execute into the project. Again, in RMiT, as I mentioned about, you have with the technical project management, about with the software development. That's where the solution architecture kicks in, right? Because why? We want to deliver successful transformation project. Okay, so whatever project that we deliver can be complied by default, by design, instead of by a shortcut, right? I know it's we like to use the word shortcut, but I think for financial services that we are talking about, I think the shortcut not worth anything, right? Because the amount of risk implication is huge to us, right? So the concept is this, the journey. Again, if you have read through the RMiT, they mentioned about the gap, right? Understanding about the baseline to the target architecture. How do you evolve this? Because you need to make sure that everything is in accordance to your guideline, to your governance. Okay, that's why you need to have some sort of methods, right? And also the context. That's very, very important. We need to put on the business fit, technology fit, application fit, capability analysis fit, and all the investment fit, right? Because this is where the so-called to get the right so-called plan for our transformation. Okay, if you want to, of course, support our compliance like RMiT. And of course, the next one is on the technology fit. It's interesting, end of support, end of life. So these are very, very critical because this is something that may look like a small thing, but actually it's the big thing, right? Because what happens when you want to be comply with the technology risk, with the so-called security, etc., you need to take note on the end of life or end of support of your entire peripheral of your IT system and operating system, hardware, software, everything, right? Because what happens is that the hacker out there, they are scanning area of entry. They are looking for something that you are using that is already end of support or end of life. Okay, so that is something very, very critical, and also that one is part of the architecture mapping itself. And with that, then you can run successful transformation, because transformation is the journey. It's not a one-time. That's why you see at the top there, continuous journey. After you achieve the target, you need to go back to the baseline, and you need to have a reference, right? Because now what happened is that many projects, phase 1, phase 2, initially phase 1 doing documentation very perfect. After phase 2, forget it lah. They keep changing. I cannot keep track. right? At the end, you have no documentation. And suddenly the thing deployed to another department doing other thing. Then somebody maintaining it. How to maintain? Have you ever come across that situation? You might think in your heart, right? I think better for me to build from scratch rather than maintaining this. It's already rojak, right? This rojak is a very, very funny taste, right? It's not sour, it's not sweet, it's not salty, but it's very, very funny. Okay, so this is something that that we need to make sure that we are aligned with this. This is also mentioned in the RMiT document. And of course, now it's about the target audience, right? As I mentioned just now in the RMiT, they segregate into all the technical project management, software development team, manager, senior manager, and board of director. Okay, so this is where the enterprise architecture playing handy, right? If you have a proper design of enterprise architecture, then you can get a so-called informed dashboard like this to target specific stakeholders. Okay, almost all the stakeholders that you mentioned, that is being mentioned in the RMiT is in this screen. Okay, or the portfolio, the architects, or the finance, the solution, the business, the head of strategy and risk officer are all there, right? And they all want to see different things, right? That's why architecture need to be designed in such a way that you target all kind of stakeholders. You don't target architecture for technical team. That's architecture 20 years ago, I would say. Today, architecture is targeting various stakeholders within the organization, right? So you see what you want to see. You don't need to see the more detailed part, right? But actually, all coming from the same. That's why I think the importance of having architecture in place. And my second agenda is on the framework and so-called industry practices. How can now I comply? So now you understand where we are heading, the context. Now, what are the things that we can adopt, right? So that we can comply into that I will highlight in my last section on this presentation. Then the next one I will continue with the next topics. Yeah? So this is the first thing first on the so-called enterprise architecture skill set, right? You want, they also mentioned about the training, about the equipping the people with the right skill set, right? Because sometimes is that management, I wouldn't say underestimate, but people said, oh, this Aaron already worked in my bank for 20 years. I think give him the title of business architect. Since he always talk about architecture. And this guy is already software engineer in the fresh graduate, now almost 50 years old, working in our bank. He know about core banking, give him the title of software architect. That doesn't work. Okay. In today's era of architecture, it doesn't work. Because what happened is that I was involved in the development of ITABOK 20 years ago, right? It's something that you need to unlearn and relearn. Okay, it's not something that I'm used to practice infrastructure. I deploy data center now. I want to become infrastructure architect. So I talk to my boss. I'll give it my boss. Boss, you give me the title. I work for 20 years in your bank, boss. So give me the title of architect. So the boss said, okay, never mind. See, nobody else qualified. I give you the title. That doesn't work. Okay, you need to be able to learn the right skill set. Like here, if you see in the ITABOK, yeah, they got 5 pillars. You need first thing first on the left pillar, business technology strategy. So you need to understand all type of the relationship between business and technology, how we can marry the two, right? Actually, this business technology strategy today, in today's context, we call it digital strategy. Okay, digital strategy involves business and technology together. Not just business team doing their own thing and technology doing their own thing. No, no such thing. We need to be forced married lah. Okay, in our language called kawin paksa rela. Okay, you don't rela pun I paksa you kawin, right? You need to be forced married between business and technology. Then the next one, human dynamic, right? IT people are typically cannot really talk to people, so they need to be able to be so-called acquainted with the people. They have some sort of soft skill, understand the politics, the tension, and etc. Then the middle one is quality attributes, right? Quality attributes including like risk, maintainability, scalability. These are very, very important, right? What they call it non-functional requirement. That's very, very important for architect to know that, right? And of course, the IT environment, like setting up the governance, the IT services, the project management, all part of the IT environment. And design skill is all the skill about all the modeling, right? All the like UML, Archimate, BPMN, etc. So all these are the 5 pillars that required by architect to perform all the necessary tasks as a business architect, information architect, software architect, infrastructure, and solution architect. By the way, if you are not doing full-time as a business architect, if you are information architect, software architect, infrastructure architect, or solution architect, your secondary role must be a business architect. Otherwise, your information, software, infrastructure, solution doesn't have value to the business. Full stop, right? So you cannot escape for the fact that I need to know business, right? And I need to perform the role of business architect. Even though my full-time job as information architect, I got the secondary role to perform the role of business architect. The role of business architect means you have to talk with the business. You can be called into the board of director and in the meeting and ask for input, right? Because of this strategy change, what's the impact to my organization? Tell me that, right? You cannot say, sorry, boss, I only looking at the data center. I only doing the data scientist. I calculate the algorithm, mapping data. I don't know about that. You cannot do that anymore. Now you have to be able to perform the role of business, and all the architect can be invited to the board of meeting and provide advisory. Okay, that's what Gartner says already in the last 3 years. Yeah. And the next one is, of course, it's about a framework. So we need to have the framework in place, right? I think in the RMiT, they call it enterprise architecture framework, but they don't mention specifically. But I can tell you that 95% of all the enterprises in the world are using this logo here, TOGAF. Okay, so let me just give you a brief overview on the TOGAF, right? So basically, the preliminary is about establishing governance, getting management buy-in, and prepare organization for transformation. Okay. This also something, and also defining a principle. This is also something that so-called very relevant to the RMiT at the preliminary stage. Then the next one, of course, developing the architecture building block, right? This is where you understand the whole concept of architecture and the impact, right? That is coming from the enterprise vision and strategy. Just now, remember I mentioned that if you are architect, you are being called into the board of the director meeting and they're changing the strategy, and you can advise them, right? Excuse me, I think with the due respect, this strategy may not be able to implement this year, because I think to implement that, we need to have this, and that, right? And then inform the board, and then the board say, okay, good, I like your feedback. The 3-step, can you propose to us, right? Then that's where the architect playing a role, right? Contributing value. Not just say, that one cannot integrate, that one cannot pass the compliance. No, such thing, right? We need to be able proactive and help the business, especially in the crystallizing and realizing their strategy and vision. That's architecture vision. Then the next one is developing business architecture gap. Once you understand the vision and strategy, where you are heading, then you need to know the gap, where the gap in the current business. Then you need to know the current gap in the data and information. And you need to know the current gap in the software and application. You need to know the current gap in the technology infrastructure. So why do you want to know about the gap? Because the gap is something that you're going to do, right? That you are going to implement in your part of your transformation. So we need to understand the gap. Then after that, we develop a solution, right? Again, this is also, if you map it, this one, I told you that, right? I keep repeating. If you know all this, right, when you read the RMiT, you'll be smiling all the way to your face, right? Because why? I have that all, right? I have all that, right? That's why the solution building block is also being addressed, right? This is why you need to consolidate the gap and prioritizing project. This is where the project PMO kicks in, right? You understand what are the gaps, how you prioritize that. Then after that, you assign, come up with the Gantt chart. Then after that, you make sure the system development align with your architecture, and also managing change, right? Because managing change also can introduce risks. This is something that it's a simple method, and interestingly, this is a journey, right? Like A, B, C, D, H, and then go back to A. Why? Because architecture or transformation is not a project. It's not there isn't ending, right? They only set a milestone, but they never end. When do they end? They end when either our life ends, sorry to say that, or our organization ended, right? Otherwise, we still continue looping all the way, right? And we need to maintain this into a centralized repository. We cannot just run this by managing this in the Excel spreadsheet, right? We need to be managed so-called digitally. That's why the concept of digital EA is coming in handy. Then the next one, of course, we need to do a modeling, right? We need to communicate it consistently so that we can go global, right? We can, regardless of what language you speak, when I present the notation, you understand what I mean, okay? This is RMiT. So for those of you who never heard or first time hearing RMiT, so RMiT is the enterprise language. How you can describe anything from motivation, what make your bosses cannot sleep at night, I can also draw it in the RMiT. What strategy they're changing, I can also map it into the RMiT. What database, what application, what network, what hosting, what security, what compliance, what a principle, governance, everything I can model. Almost, I would say this already 12 years, right? It's very comprehensive, right? And very easy to use. So there will be something that for certain group of people. If you see here, they got the motivation about the purple color. This actually targeting business people. The yellow is targeting senior management level. The yellow part is targeting the business people. The blue one targeting the application. The green one is targeting the technology people. And they got the purple one actually targeting those project team, right? So almost everything that you can imagine that happening in the enterprise, you can describe this in the language. Okay, so with that we can connect business, application, and technology nicely and neatly, right? So this is what we need to have to understand the impact of any changes or transformation that we have. Okay, and this of course it will support the RMiT compliance with no-brainer. Okay, you have this, you can automatically almost there comply, because I've read a couple of times, and I look at it, wow, this is what the organization need. Of course, despite the fact now shortcut initiative are all there, but I think let's fix it once for all for many years to come, right? Because we want to create a so-called resilient financial industry in Malaysia, right? As the hub and center for all the financial institutions all over the world. And then the next one, of course, security framework, right? Not sure you heard SAPSA, right? This is something that also can be married quickly into the entire framework, right? That can map directly into the TOGAF and also all the framework that just now I described earlier. Okay, so it is also a security infrastructure that actually a solution that support critical business initiative. That is, again, if you want to tackle the security, don't tackle from the technology part, tackle from the business. So where do you start? So always start from the key stakeholders, the board of directors. What are their concern, appetite on the security? Because if you, of course, you may say, hey, my board director don't talk about that. Then it is the chance for us to educate, right? Because now they have to sign in the RMiT compliance, and they cannot say, sorry, this one I leave it to my IT team. No. You are mentioned there, your name there, and I believe you have to return the signatory page to a Bank Negara, and you say that you are not interested. Oh, you can't do that, right? So you need to be able, it's an opportunity for us to educate, right? What are the security exposure concern that senior management may have, okay? Then the next, of course, this SAPSA is that they are looking at how the business requirement for security can be modeled, right? So they got the concept of context, concept, logical, physical, and the component itself. Okay, that all these are eventually we come out the gap, and the gap is where we can see as a new opportunity, right, to be developed and exploited. So this is something that I think is quite relevant. Of course, the next one that we need to know, the security cross-cutting multiple layers, not only on data, because people confuse only data and network. Most of the time, network security, cyber security, and data. But application also can expose security, right? So we need to be able to understand this, and also the business. Maybe because of the wrong process, you are given the wrong SOP to the wrong role, and that's why the security kicks in, security loophole kicks in, right? So how do we protect that, right? So we need to understand all this model completely. And of course, these are the model how the enterprise architecture and enterprise architecture can work hand in hand, right? So the left-hand side is where we get the enterprise architecture framework in place. Okay, so typically when at the preliminary and the vision, we are talking about business driver, business objective. We need to know the security principle, the risk appetite of the key stakeholders. Then after that, the business impact, right? And what are the resource plan, right? We're asking the senior management. Now we are very fortunate because of the RMiT. I think we can talk this type of conversation with the board of directors, because they are this where the preliminary and vision is, right? It's about the enterprise vision, where they want to transform the bank to, what sort of offering they want to do. So these are the conversation that we need to capture. Okay, then the next one on the business. So we need to look at the security, policy architecture, domain, the trust, the risk, and also the regulatory, right? And also all the control framework that we are using, whether using COVID or all type of the governance. We need to make sure that we capture this. Then the next one is on the information system, right? So we will look at the service and security classification and data quality, etc. So these are just some example and can be more, right? So these are something that we need to look at. And of course, they got many others, the identity access management, also mentioned in the RMiT, right? Continuity, security, intelligence, monitoring, compliance. All these are the word is out there in the RMiT document, right? If you look at the thing, if you read there more than 10 times, you look at this, you'll be smiling, right? Almost all what is being asked is addressed here. Okay. Then of course, security standard on the technology, right? When you do hosting, cloud, and all type of the data center setup. Then, of course, the requirement is also very, very important, right? We need to make sure that we monitor and track them, right? And put it into the central repository so that we can is shareable across all aspects of our enterprise. Then, of course, when we do the migration, right, we need to look at the risk mitigation, how the project can interrupt the business. Okay. Then, when do migration planning, so we look at all the risk assessment, right? Then in the implementation, we look at the security audit and security compliance. That's very, very important. Then when there is some changes, we also cannot take changes lightly because it could be some changes that may cause our system to be vulnerable, right? So we need to look architecture, governance, risk management, because the changes could be just the upgrade, right? The upgrade of the system that you think, never mind, is the auto update to the latest version, but actually the latest version introduced another bugs that may cause vulnerability. So we need to know all type of the process in place. Okay, so the concept is this, right? We know that on the left hand side is our enterprise, right? That we have all knowledge, people, process, and technology. And of course, when talking about RMiT, is that we need to be able to trace. Basically, I need to know what the other department doing. I need to know what the other business unit doing. I need to know what the process they do. Because what happens is that the process come to my process, and every time I receive the complaint, and I don't know where this come from, right? As far as my team is concerned, we are doing it right. But it could be coming from the process -1 or -2. So how do we model that, right? That's what we call it about the so-called building the digital enterprise map. So we can understand, we can source that, where does this come from? Oh, this coming from my motivation, right? Motivation of the key stakeholders. One of the so-called senior management initiated this. And we also need to know about the capability, about all the resources that involve. Then we understand the impact to the business, right? So these are something is real. This is not a concept. This is a real implementation, right? That you need to understand this mapping, the impact to the business. Then how the application supporting that, and also the technology. Because all these are very, very key when you want to manage the risk and the agility. If you don't have this, what would you do if anything happened? You just shut down, right? Shut down the core banking system. Because why? I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what is this. Because this guy, this module or this system handled by the other team. And the other team today, this week on training. I don't know what to do. So what should I do? Shut it down, right? When you shut down the system, what happens? Your ATM don't work, right? You cannot function as a bank, right? Or your mobile banking also don't work, right? And you can't do that. We need to be able to isolate things fast, yeah? I have a couple of samples after this. Then this way, you need to have also connectivity with the information data. Then the bottom part is where you are going to have multiple execution on the project. Yeah, so this enterprise traceability is key if you want to get RMiT compliance. Yeah. Then the next one, of course, classification, also very, very important. This is where if things goes wrong, right, you can classify and quarantine particular information or function quickly. Okay, don't get panic, shut down the whole core banking, right? We can isolate, okay, this is the thing, and this connect to the system database, we shut it down that part only, right? Because it doesn't spread to the other one, right? It's like you have everything in control. Okay, this is just an example. Then the next one also, you know, which application impacted, right? Again, you need to have this type of meta model in your architecture. Okay, your architecture need to be able to show this almost like instantly, right? The most 5 minutes. Why I do a 5 minutes? I need to understand your question, and I need to look at all the query that I can have, and I can produce this, right? I would say 5 minutes. If you don't have enterprise architecture, it may take you 5 weeks or 5 months, okay, to give this type of report. Or come towards, you engage another consulting company to study this report, right? To produce this report. By the time, got another vulnerability. So even have an end story, right? Is this what our life is? So you need something to fix once for all, and not the so-called shortcutting, incremental, fixing. And this is another example, right? How we can do impact analysis. Say for motivation. Motivation basically is from the senior management, right? That's already set, and we already define and model the motivation. Okay. So in here is the context of the sharing back office application for all product. That's the mandate of senior management. Because why? Otherwise, too expensive, right? If every product got a multiple team, I want them to share, right? And of course, support for financial transaction and etc. and policy administration. So how does that map to the business? Oh, that's on the particular when you handle claim, right? So when you handle claim, you go into the one platform, share everything, right? Regardless of any type of claim in the insurance, right? Then the system, we can see straight away what system are supporting this. Okay. So if anything that I want to change, we know exactly which system that I need to tweak, rather than Now panico, the IT guy say, don't know, so many modules, so many things, all type of excuses they come up, right? I mean, I'm not talking, I'm not sidelining the IT people, but this is the typical challenge because they got so many things to do, right? And they can answer that instantly. But if you have the model of architecture, you can just bring it up, right? Just a click of the button. Then you are now understand, so what sort of infrastructure that impacted here? Okay, what are we talking about here? Okay, the bosses we want to know this. So what are we talking the impact here? You tell me 3 months, what's the 3 months we are doing? I need to know that. Because I heard that some other bank, they can do it in 3 days. Why I need 3 months? Right? So we need to have this type of the so-called presentation. These are using the RMiT. So the next thing, same thing, right? When you want to particular process, right? The particular process that we receive a complaint or vulnerability, we can look and map it, open up the entire process, and we can look at the particular application, right? Why is like this, right? So how come the accept and adjudicate not supported by technology? I want to know that. What have you been doing this for many years? And why can't everyone look into this, right? So you have some sort of fact for you to do transformation. And likewise, for when you're executing the infrastructure, you can have all the so-called end-to-end feasibility when you want to so-called comply, because all these are very, very important. As I mentioned just now in my opening speech, that they got I know one of the organization, they got 5 people just maintaining this relationship using Excel. That is, I think, a bit ridiculous today in today's era, right? Everything needs to be a click of button, and I want to see visual, and I can turn it into the information, the dashboard, the targeting a very. Okay. So of course, when we also want to retire application system or isolate particular system, right? We can straight away isolate, based on the capability. What are the capability impacted, right? So capability means something that we need to provide, right? The function. So all this will be down. I understand, right? Because we are migrating the system, and these are the impact, right? So you can give a so-called more confident answer rather than tell boss, I'm not so sure, but I think I will shut down 10 system next week for 2 days because we are upgrading, right? You can't do that. You need to be able to see exactly what's the impact and show it to the entire organization. Okay, same thing when you want to look at the application support, right? Managing IT knowledge capability, we need to know exactly the impact. And of course, like the context of the consumer banking, what actually they do, right? What sort of the so-called capability they deliver. So we should be able to also query that from our architecture. Okay, and likewise, when you got end of support, end of life, this is something very, very critical, right? I think most of the Malaysia bank also go regional, right? And we need to know the entire inventory stock of your IT asset. I mentioned just now that typically, organization or hacker are targeting this end of support, end of life inventory of software and carry forward. So we need to be able to so-called get this updated real time, right? So that we are secure, we are minimized from the risk exposure. Okay, again, this is also in the compliant with the RMiT. All right, so let me just take this 3 minutes video why enterprise architecture, then I will do on the RMiT section by section with what just now I described. Okay.
Why enterprise architecture? Well, here's a reason. Michael works at our company. Now, because of new business demands, he is in need of specific data. But his data is spread out over different applications. Exclusively for Michael, a developer writes a program that'll get his data from applications A, B, and C and write it to an Excel file in directory Y. That way, Michael will be able to read all the data in his spreadsheet and use it. Michael then realizes that he needs this on a daily basis. It would save a lot of time if the program ran automatically every day. Therefore, an infrastructure manager writes a batch job to set this up for him. Now, an application flow has been created, especially for Michael, which daily basis. It would save a lot of time if the program ran automatically every day. Therefore, an infrastructure manager writes a batch job to set this up for him. Now, an application flow has been created, especially for Michael, which depends on a number of other applications. But Michael is not the only one who wants to improve his efficiency. So multiply this situation by a few thousand. We call this hairball architecture. Think of it as a huge hairball with fibers going in every possible direction. No one's keeping track of it, and no one has control over it. Now, imagine we have to replace a huge application because it's out of date and the supplier has said that in 2 years they'll stop the support. We have no idea what the application is connected to. It's an endless network of dependencies which were all created one at a time. And each connection made sense at the time, but the total is such a chaotic situation that it's impossible to change one aspect without damaging something else. Now that's where enterprise architecture comes in. We have to deal with the IT landscape in such a way that people have the freedom to create improvements and that there's always room for innovation. Architecture makes sure that our IT landscape is robust as well as flexible and efficient. This requires a process to keep things organized. For this reason, each new project needs a project start architecture. This is created by a project architect who is part of the project team. He or she writes a plan explaining how the total landscape will look when the project is complete. This plan includes the applications we've set up, what they do for the business, and the hardware they require. The project start architecture is evaluated by the architecture board. In this board, architects from every domain in our company work together and supervise the entire landscape. Summarized, enterprise architecture is about three things. We take a look at the existing situation. We help to develop and evaluate designs. And we create a sketch for the future so that everyone understands the direction we're heading. Architecture is about insight and knowledge. The world doesn't lend itself to being easily understood or pinned down in rules. There's no way we can know what the regulators are going to say to us 3 years from now. But what we can do is make choices which will ensure that we will be flexible, robust, and efficient in the future. Because in the end, it's all about maintaining our ability to change. That's why enterprise architecture.
Right, so I will be going into the last topic for this part 1, right, about mapping RMiT document for compliant with the industry framework. Okay, so I would presume that this section actually is the exact section 8.01 to 8.13. I know it looks like time. It's not now. It's about 11 o'clock, not 8 o'clock. But this actually is section 8.1 and until 8.13, right? So it has been highlighted on the responsibility for senior management. Okay, so that's where the like the TOGA framework, the RMiT EL language can help to address this so-called requirement. Yeah. The next one on the technology risk, establishing technology risk management framework, and also security team and CISO, right? Again, you cannot just look at the security alone, but you need to connect the entire enterprise, right? Because security can be coming from the business, data, application, technology, and can also be strategy. The wrong strategy that being initiated and can expose the entire whole range of the security risk. So we need to understand on the EF framework, and we need to again like RMiT to connect the teams so to understand all the visual impact analysis and the dependency, right? Instead of just focusing on the security alone. Then on the technology project management and the governance, that's quite interesting. This one I think involve a lot of framework, the ITABOX skill set, enterprise security framework, COBIT for the governance, and the project management like PMP or Prince2. Okay, all these need to be so-called properly adopted and guided, yeah, in the organization and also governed. The next one is on the system development and acquisition, right? We're talking about enterprise architecture framework need to be established, software development life cycle, right? Testing and also software configuration management. That is something quite relevant. So everything need to be in place, right? This requirement of RMiT was there is in the purpose or the objective to have things in place, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be labeled as the cowboy, right? Cowboy is the common term used that just anyhow do, right? Everything shortcut. But yes, you can do it for the so-called urgent pressing need. But after the one completed, you need to look back. You need to look back into how the architecture can be integrated there. Yeah. Then this way you need to have of course framework, skill set, all the IT or DevOps need to be there. Yeah. Then cryptography, right? You can look at the EF framework and also the COVID, because for the governance, you need to make sure that what sort of thing that you're going to apply that the policy there. Yeah, that's why I got like COVID to ensure that we adopted the best practice on the IT governance compliant policy. Then data center infrastructure, data center operation, basically talking about all the network. But again, you cannot look at the infrastructure alone. You need to map back into the motivation and the business itself, right? So that's why you need to have a comprehensive framework. We need to get EA, ITABOK skill set, right? Because you need to understand business technology strategy. And of course, all the ITIL to support all the IT service management there. Then of course about network resilience, third-party service provider, cloud service, access control, right? All these almost include everything, right? That you need like a framework, skill set, enterprise security, COVID IT. So all are so-called the ingredient or the industry framework that can be applied, right? Because we cannot just putting this by a document. We need to put it into a process, right? Enterprise process. Then the next one on the patch and end of life system management, just now I mentioned end of support, end of life, right? Has been there in the RMiT requirement, right? So it's very important because we cannot, I have met quite a number of the so-called IT services team that responsible for this, but they're managing in Excel, right? But sometimes they forgot because Excel cannot give you a warning. And then if they develop a system also not there, right? By right, they should have some sort of the workflow, right? Integrated into the architecture platform that we highlight that in 3 months, 6 months, this system will be expired, end of support, end of life. And as an architect, we cannot be ignorant. That consider our top priority, because anything that is we ignore this can cause any so-called security vulnerability, right? And of course, cyber risk, security of digital services, I think I mentioned in my presentation, all these are required, right? Then cybersecurity operation, and also DDoS, DLP, SOC, right? All these need require enterprise security framework in place, integrated, right? Then of course all the IT DevOps, right? And all these are so-called cyber response, recovery, and technology audit, right? So they need so-called the additional of the COVID, the governance. And the last part, all the section 13, 14, 15, right? Talking about all the technology related application, assessment of gap analysis. I think just I mentioned about how you do a gap analysis, right? You need all the framework and internal awareness and training, right? So all the training that this one will lead into my part 2 of my presentation. Okay. So my part 2 of presentation, I will be sharing on this exactly on the solution itself. Okay, let me just share the screen. Okay, I will leave the Q&A towards the end, right? Because yeah, let me just finish this one first, then we can go through the Q&A together with Dr. Vijay. Okay, let me. Okay, so the topic is basically about. Let me just do a 2-liner about introducing who we are, right? And then after that, we go into the enterprise architect definition. What is enterprise architect, right? Then after that, we look at the training courses, and after that, they got the jumpstart program. Okay, so this is about who we are doing a lot of the learning and also all the events, right? Focusing a lot on the enterprise architecture. Okay, so because enterprise architecture, I think today is very relevant to the business, to the digital era or digital transformation. So we offer a comprehensive training services in ISA program, all the certification, right, that I will be sharing later, and also from the open group like TOGAF, business architecture, RMiT, and all the governance, right, from the COVID, and also the ITIL and also DevOps. These are the so-called, just now I mentioned on the industry practices and solution that can help us align with the RMiT. Okay, so these are some of the clients. I think these are so-called winners in the 2018 and 2019, right? Actually, last year they should have another award, but because of the COVID-19, so they postponed. So not sure whether this year they have it or not. But typically, year on year, we have our client won the award at the global arena. Okay, this is for Mampu and Kementerian Perumahan, and the other bottom part is from Statistik Indonesia. Okay. Then these are some of the clients that we have, right? That I think some of you already here. right? So these are the client that yeah, we are also in close communication with the Gartner in terms of the reviewing the output, etc. And these are two top 10 year awards last year. So this year, actually the nomination is closed next week, right? So we also submitting a couple of clients. So two of our clients, I think, you know, in Malaysia, Pemasaran Nasional Berhad and Mampu won the top 10 year awards of 2020. Okay, this says a lot about our capability. Okay, so the rest are all some of our client that we have done in Malaysia, Singapore, as well as Indonesia and Hong Kong. So let me just focus quickly on the enterprise architect definition, right? Because some of you may ask, what is the architect? Who is the architect? Okay, let's borrow the concept from the building architecture. I think building architecture is the very well known, right? We need to have the architect to build the design, to build a new office or new house, right? So it has a so-called a combination of the arts and science, right? You may not be a top architect even you got straight A+ in your civil engineering degree, right? You need to apply the ability to adapt into the culture, trend. They call it arts. Okay, if you want to be the famous architect in Malaysia, you need to have combining art and science. The same thing with the medicine, the doctor, right? If you see the famous doctor, they're combining art and science together. They are not just looking at by the theory itself. They need to assess the situation of the patient and they apply the right medication. The same thing now with the architects, right? So the architect is that the art and science of designing and delivering valuable technology strategy for the business. So there's a business client as our business target as our client. Okay, it's very important for us to be able to discover and deliver value for them. So, and as enterprise architect, I think we are dealing a lot with the business team, right? That's why in the RMiT it's mentioned that the architect, you know, they got the so-called, not mentioning about architect, but the compliant between business and technology, right? They got the from senior management, board of director, IT team, almost all the team in the structure of the bank are there, right? So the business team, we need to be able to interact, right? We need to bridge between business and technology. Likewise with the technical team, right? Technical team, we need to mentor them, we need to guide them, we need to coach them. And of course, management team, right? This is where, again, if you see all these are pretty aligned with all the what mentioned with the, even like vendor suppliers, is also mentioned in the RMiT, right? So of course, RMiT don't mention that you quickly form the higher architects. No, they don't do that, but they tell you you need to have this, right? But you need to find the answer, right? They got many ways to solve this, right? So I'm just sharing with you one of the so-called way that you can quickly adapt and comply with the RMiT. Okay. Then of course with the stakeholders, stakeholder also is mentioned there, right? So these are something that are critical architect to interface with in our day-to-day job. Of course with the industry body or government association. So like for us, it's like we need to be complying with the say Bank Negara Malaysia. So we need to be able to with the central bank compliance. Then of course, who can become enterprise architect? I mean, if yesterday, at least you need to have you know, flying time of 10 years, right? And you must be lucky enough to perform multiple role in a typical organization, right? So I don't know how many of us will be lucky enough to get to perform all this role, right? Typically, we only perform 1 or 2 roles for the last 15 years. We are not lucky enough to perform multiple roles. So it's very difficult, right? So what happened is that this is also another third criteria. If you want to be successful architect, you fail in a couple of last IT projects, burn millions of dollars, and you are not put in the Kajang prison. Okay, you never see any IT professional or IT team fail IT project and put them in the prison. No, right? In fact, we are one of the 2 professions in the world when fail is being tolerated. Do you know who's the other profession? Is the weather forecast. Okay, if the weather forecast this morning said today will be one thunderstorm, raining, suddenly sunny, right? Nobody cursing me, because oh, it's the act of God, right? So we are one of the 2 of a lucky profession that when failure thing, they don't bring us into the court of justice, right? So the most is that you are being deployed to another team, right? So this is the era of our world. Okay, but soon it will be ended because we need to be accountable now. They got the process, they got the architecture to be able to someone accountable and responsible. Okay, so this is where the now today. So anyone who has some interest to become architects, having to understand the value of business and technology relationship. This is very important, right? I think you can see the RMiT also mentioning this a lot of the context between business and IT. Okay, and of course you need to master just now all the industry framework, right? Like ITABOK, TOGAF, RMiT, so that we can apply and drive transformation successfully, and of course complying with all the industry standard and also regulatory. So the concept is here is that we want to drive transformation. So architects are playing a critical role because architect glue or the source of a hub, right? That connect every type of transformation, right? Because architect, just now I mentioned to you, you can see in my first part that they connect from the motivation to the business, to the application, to the data, to the infrastructure. You want to connect to the strategy, hosting, like inside out, outside in, outside out, or the architect within the architect purview, right? Because architect is someone that I think today are still missing in many organizations, but I think now is the time for us to establish and grow this architecture team to deliver value, okay, for the organization. Especially important to drive transformation because transformation is require a lot of analysis. It's not only a project, but actually it's the commitment and also for long term. So we need to invest on do something right for the first time. We cannot do something right when we are doing it the third time or the fourth time. We can't afford that, right? We need to do it right for the first time. That's why we need to have architect in place. So the next one, we go through quickly on the architecture training course and certification that I think we have a joint program with the Asian Banking School. Yeah. So these are so-called the certification. The first one is from the ISA. So all the certification of the business, infrastructure, software, solution, and all the specialists on the certification skill set. Then the next one is on the so-called TOGAF, right? The framework, and also the language like RMiT from the open group. Then of course the governance, yeah, from ISACA, and also the people search on the IT services, DevOps that are quite critical in the today context of the digital transformation. Okay, so let me just quickly go through on the business architect specialization. So basically, business architect is someone, of course, who own the business technology strategy. And remember, just now I mentioned earlier that every architect, if you are not a full-time business architect, you need to perform the role of business architect. That means, yeah, if you carry the title of architect, regardless you are security architect or infrastructure architect, database architect, you need to know this. Okay, no exception. You cannot say, I'm not so sure about business, but my boss give me the title, my boss attend business meeting. No, you should attend the business meeting, right? You need to be able to discuss about business. Then, of course, today context, this is also the person which is called a digital strategist. They understand technology as well as business, right? And they can almost troubleshoot the entire enterprise, right? If anything processed wrong or any dispute, you can quickly open up your digital repository, right? The enterprise map, and you can quickly troubleshoot what happened and what's the impact. Why the thing happen in this department? Can you open up the business process in the department? I want to know what's business function they do, right? How they interact with another business. So you should be able to drive this quite quickly, right? Every architect. And of course, you need to understand the impact of technology that impacting the business capability. That's very, very important. So this is, in a nutshell, this so-called the business architect role definition. Of course, they got the certification path, right? So the first part, actually, the bottom one is business architecture fundamental. This I think is quite very popular. So this is basically to give a so-called a common understanding, right, between what are the challenges faced by business team, what are the challenges faced by the IT team, and how they can work together moving forward, especially in architecting and capturing the requirement. Because, you know, in all the things that we do, we can focus a lot on technology, but if the requirement create, whatever we do also doesn't bring any results, right? It's going to fail. So we need to make sure that we so-called fix it to the root cause of where the problem can occur, right? Which is on the business IT relationship to get them understanding well. Okay, this is what the business architecture fundamental. Then after that, they move to the architecture core. Typically, is the journey of a particular financial services, the bank, actually the company called Tinker Bank, right? So they got headwire and they are firefighting and etc. So how you are being hired as an architect, right? You are developing the framework, you are helping the business. At the end, you deliver value. So they got about 17 scenario on the architecture core. Then go into the TOGAF, right? So the TOGAF also using a lot of the assurance and also the banking context, right? How you can actually apply the framework in the financial services context. Then the RMiT, also using the financial services context, how you can model all the concern of the motivation from the business, application, technology, and as well as all the way into the implementation. Then the next one is business technology strategy. It's like, I would say, like the mini MBA, whereby you understand how we can help or deliver value of technology to the business. So we need to understand the business landscape. We need to understand who are we competing with, right? What are the data we can get from the stakeholders? What are the concerns from the various stakeholders? How we can align that together, right? So that we can align technology solution to solve the business. Then after that, of course, at the top where you have all the specialization, right? Business architect, information, infra, software, and solution. All these are based on the skill set. And of course, they got all the so-called the rest on the COVID and the customer journey map. Yeah. So the next one is on the information architect, right? So basically, it's the someone who hold the so-called information strategies, right? So basically, they understand where the data coming from, right? Where the data dictionary, taxonomy. So typically, information architect working very, very closely with the data scientists. Okay. So if you have data scientists in organization, that is the good candidate to upgrade them to become information architect, right? Because this is where the information architect get the whole connectivity with the business strategy and the entire business architecture landscape. Because I come across to a lot of conversation on the challenges on the data scientist itself is that they are lacking on the business acumen, right? That's why this information architecture, so-called like a training course certification, it will equip the data scientists to upgrade them to see a bigger pictures on the entire enterprise, okay, rather than the data alone. So because they need to connect with the strategy, motivation of the key stakeholders, and etc. Okay, this is something that very, very relevant. And of course, the information need to support the business. So without the business, well, you're not an architect. Okay, so you also need to understand about the typical information troubleshooting, and also any inconsistency that may impact business decision making process. Okay, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that every business unit, every division having the information, the right information for them to execute the day-to-day task, and also making a strategic decision. That's the job of information architect. Okay, so the path, I think, is similar with the business, except that they end at the information architecture certification, at the top level there. So the next one is software. So software, I think, is quite mature in terms of the profession. Many of architects actually coming from the software world, right? Software development world, okay, and also infrastructure world. So this is where you look at the connectivity, you look at the application strategy, and you look at applications pattern to support the business. It's very, very important because we got many islands of information, right? Our application, we need to connect them together. And also we look at the so-called how the potential silo system that may impact business process flow. I just now remember that I show you the Archimedes on the business process, how the application itself, the silo cannot connect, cannot support the business. So we need, our job is that to make sure that all so-called smooth integrated flow of the business supported by the application. Okay, so they got additional recommended training like architecting software with object-oriented analysis and design and the UML. So that one is very, very important because you need to understand about building the component that is reusable and also connected, right? Before you can go all the way to become a software architect to deliver value of technology. The next one, infrastructure. Okay, infrastructure also are very, very popular now. I mean, because of the same like the software. So either you're coming from software or infra. Okay, so typically, of course, dealing with all the data center, all the business continuity, network, etc. This also mentioned the section in the RMiT, right? That you need to have a very resilient data center, networks, server, hosting, and etc. Okay, so this is what we call it technology strategies. Okay, understand the whole technology landscape to support the business. Okay, and of course, to ensure that no technology disruption and also business must continue. Okay, we call it business continuity. Of course, you can handle this directly from the BCP or business continuity plan or business continuity management, but you need to be supported by the architects, okay? Because the architect is ensuring all this. Otherwise, you just come out the policy, but after that, back to square one again. It still got disrupted. So you need to have some sort of architecture in place to get this fixed once for all. That's what I would say, right? Not a quick fix, but fixing for sustainability. Okay, so they got the path there, similar with the business, then end up in the infrastructure architecture certification. So the next one in the solution, right? So solution architect basically is someone you assign into the project. Again, solution architect is the title that typically being abused a lot, right? Especially by the vendor. The vendor said, I'm the solution architect. Because why? I do everything. Whatever you want solution, you talk to me. Okay, I can supply printer, I can supply network cable, I can supply router, I can supply anything. Keyboard also I can supply. or notebook also I can supply. But no, this is not the solution architect you are talking about from the vendor. This is the solution architect that you put the architect into the project. Okay, so typically if the project 6 months, solution architect will be there in 6 months, right? To ensure that the implementation are smooth according to the architecture. Because sometimes that architecture has been done correctly, but the solution is the people who are implementing don't understand architecture. They do their own way, right? At the end, your architecture back to square one. That's why you need to plan or put solution architect to do the surveillance, to make sure the governance, compliance, audit, and etc. Okay. So you call it IT strategies, right? So understand the architecture solution for the system development and implementation to support the business. And of course, system troubleshooter to make sure that the system being implemented align with the architecture and support the business. Okay. I hope that makes sense. The whole spectrum of the architecture role, right? So is solution architect typically almost taking all the recommended path, okay, and end up in the solution architecture. And interestingly, in the solution architecture is the 4 days training. The first day it will be covering a lot on the business architecture. The second day will be covering a lot on the information architecture. The third day will be covering a lot on the software architecture, and the fourth day is about infrastructure architecture and how to glue them into a solution. Okay, so this is also one of the popular courses at the certification. But again, if you are performing solution architect, you don't forget you also need to master the business architecture, right? Because your solutioning without understanding the business doesn't deliver any value. You just become another software engineer. I mean, I don't look down the software. I'm not belittle software engineer, but now architect is you need to be able to deliver value and also the opportunity for us to upgrade our level and our expertise to the next level. Okay. So the next one, I think I will just go too quickly on the what are the program, right? Just now you say, oh, okay, I got the training. Understand? I can send people for training. Of course, we got the joint program, ABS and TD. But now, is there any jumpstart, right? I'm talking about the jumpstart means customized training. In the same time, got hand-holding coaching program, right? So these are so-called, we have 3 phases. The first one called discover phases. Okay. So in the discover phases, basically will be so-called hand-holding organization, right? It's under guided, prescriptive, right? A joint team together to establish digital enterprise architecture as a culture. Okay. So basically hand-on-hand going through the journey together. Then it's typically about 8 weeks, right? So these are the customized training. So we will bundle all the necessary a training program, right? Just prior to the implementation. So this is more on the guided and the hands-on embarkation into so-called before we can deploy. Okay. So this is basically involve so-called a 4 step. Right, the first one is on the EA discovery and visioning. So we work together with the client to discover this. Then after that, we're developing the baseline, understanding what you have, and then developing a target. So once you're developing the target, then you know where you are heading and what you have. Then you got the gap, right? Then after that, we look at the readiness. So are we ready to embark? Okay, this is called the EA discover phase. The next one is deploy phase. Right, so the deploy phase is actually the continuation from the discover phase, discover phase, right? So this way we are doing the orchestrating of the business, data, application, and technology to support the continuation of the business transformation, right? And typically about 8 weeks, right, where we are doing a coaching program, right, so that we can so that your team can be equipped with this so-called hand-holding and guided prescriptive program, right, to embark into a sustained phase. Okay, so these are the informant, like we are delivering a framework, a process, a meta model, right? Then after that, of course, a configuration of the repository, right, and then change management, adoption, as well as the establishment of development life cycle. So development life cycle here means is that remember the EA is the journey. So after we move from the target to the baseline, how do we manage the entire process? It's all about that. So the last phase is actually about sustain, right? Sustain is where you want to sustain your architecture practice so that you can maintain or improve. Yeah? Then, of course, you can prioritize on any dimension factors. So dimension factors basically the area that need to be to have a special attention on your architecture. Could be stakeholders, could be strategy, could be politics, etc. So this basically maturity will discover that, right? Then after that, of course, support and maintenance of your digital EA platform and repository, because they need to be so-called maintained, like the car needs a servicing, right? So the same thing, your EA repository platform also need to be serviced to maintain that they can run at the optimal condition. Okay? So there will be a digital EA maturity and support and maintenance.